Did you know that you can score 2 free gifts after purchasing a minimum of as little as $15 from these 2 amazing online stores? From these stores, you can find a wide array of products you're looking for, including beauty products, candle lanterns, and other candle products, desktop clocks, and indoor and outdoor furniture. From the 2 following stores, www.youravon.com/repstore/Stuart Carter. That's www.youravon.com/repstore/STEWARDCARTER. And the second site is www.sjcexpress80.com. That's www.sjcexpress80.com. Proceeds from your purchase from either store will go to a local Red Cross chapter that will be assisting Hurricane Ian victims in Florida. So claim your free gift today by purchasing a minimum of only $15 from www.youravon.com/repstore/Stuart Carter. And the second site is www.sjcexpress80.com. If you experience any difficulties ordering, call or text at 804-308-7479. And again, proceeds from your purchase will assist Hurricane Ian victims in Florida. So you want to win some free merch from HeSaidSheHeard.com? It's real easy. Just go to our website, www.HeSaidSheHeard.com, and then click follow. If you don't have a Podbean account, no problem. It's free to sign up, and guess what? You win a free magnet. And then after that, watch an episode. That's right. Watch an episode and leave a comment. If you leave a comment, guess what? Guess what you get? A free spiral ring notebook of your choice from our merch store. Now let's say you want a t-shirt. So if you refer a new follower to He Said She Heard via Podbean or another preferred podcast app, guess what? You'll get a free t-shirt that way.
Benvenuti al fantastico show He Said She Heard. Chi è l'ospite di oggi, Mike?
Dominique Cordero.
Oh, welcome to our show. Could you repeat the name, Mike?
Dominique Cordero.
Let's welcome our guest today.
Hola, bienvenidos. Welcome to He Said, She Heard. He said, ella yo. Yo soy tu host, Mike Fox. ¿Cómo estás, mi gente? Now, the reason I'm speaking a little bit of Spanglish is because what a better way to introduce the guest here today on our show today. She has such a wonderful story, and she has earned the nickname La Mariposa. Dominique Cordero is here today. Did I say your name right, Dominique?
You did. Yeah,
wonderful.
Dominique Cordero. Mm-hmm.
Cordero, wonderful. How are you today, Dominique?
I'm doing excellent. How about yourself?
Doing wonderful, thank you. ¿Cómo estás?
Estoy súper bien. ¿Y tú?
Súper bien, gracias.
Muy bien.
I just had to have you on the show because I was just so fascinated by your story that's 10 years in the making, and you're still perfecting it and you're passing it on to other people. You teach Spanish online, you post videos. It's just such a fascinating story about how one trip to Barcelona, Spain, then to Mexico City, all that traveling, that immersion in Spanish culture led you to be so passionate and to learn so much Spanish to sound like a native speaker. It's just an incredible journey. So when I was reading that, I was just so fascinated, and I thought this would be, you'd be a perfect guest for the show.
Yeah, it's been an amazing ride the last 10, 12 years.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
That's amazing. So it all started in Barcelona, Spain. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it actually all started in Sacramento.
Sacramento. Okay.
Yeah, where I'm originally from. I started dancing salsa when I was 21. And I'm part Puerto Rican, but I had never really explored that side of my heritage before. And I started just dancing salsa because it looked interesting to me, not because I was in search of exploring my heritage more, but I ended up falling in love with it, particularly the music. I started singing all of the lyrics to the songs. I could memorize them, but I didn't know what I was singing. I had no idea what the language meant besides some rudimentary high school Spanish classes that I had taken. So at 23, I decided I needed a big change in my life. I needed to make a big change, and I wanted to explore more of the language. And so I had my heart set on living abroad in Europe for a year. And I chose Spain because of the Spanish, obviously. And I went online and Googled, how does a 23-year-old, someone who's not in college and can't study abroad, how do you support yourself for a year in another country? And I realized that I could be a nanny for a family. I could be an au pair. And an au pair, the beauty of it is it's always an exchange of a girl coming or a boy coming from another country to live with your family for a year. And the agreement is that you work part-time watching the kids, but then you also have equal time to go to a language school. So that you're there to learn the language and the culture. It's not just a nanny position. It's an au pair, which is a French word, meaning exchange, right?
Okay.
So I hopped online and went on sort of a match.com for au pairs and families and found a family. And within 3 months, I had sold my car, given up my apartment lease, and hopped on a plane with a one-way ticket to Spain to go live with a family I had never met in a country I didn't speak the language in. And I was 23, very brave at that time.
Wow.
Now that I think about it. It was an absolute culture shock. I thought that I knew more Spanish than I actually did. And once I started conversing with locals, I realized that I knew very little and that I would really have to dedicate my time to my Spanish classes. And so I took 20 hours of Spanish a week for an entire year. And besides nannying or being an au pair, I looked at learning Spanish as a full-time job, or another part-time job, I guess you could say. I took it very seriously because I wanted to go back to the States with something tangible from spending that year in Spain. I didn't want to, squander away that time or come back without something tangible. And I wanted to be able to speak fluently by the time I got back to Sacramento. And I sure did. I sure did after that year.
Yeah, because you're around the people and you hear the way they talk naturally, and then you find yourself doing that. And maybe even, I'm guessing you probably were using some of the slang that's not printed in the, or I should say digitally, since everything's online, not available on all the Spanish translators out there.
Exactly. So I think it was a blend of my dedication to my Spanish classes and building all of my skills at the same time, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, all simultaneously, while also being surrounded by the language and hearing it every day and slowly beginning to use it every day. I also made it a point to not have any American friends, really. I didn't really have any English-speaking friends. All my friends were Spanish-speaking on purpose because I didn't want to be in an English bubble. Yeah. I wanted to put myself in really uncomfortable situations to learn faster. And at 23, I was not embarrassed to do that. I think maybe the older we get, the more embarrassed we are about being in uncomfortable situations. But at that time, my early 20s, I went for it. So I think it was a mix. I think I've met a lot of people who have either spent some time abroad or have gone to a Spanish-speaking country thinking the immersion is going to be the thing, like the magic ticket to fluency, but it really starts with you and going to a Spanish-speaking country with a plan as to how you're going to learn. Are you going to take immersive Spanish classes every day? Are you going to make English friends and speak English all day? Or are you going to make Spanish friends and speak Spanish all day? So it's really a conscious effort to learn a language. I think people romanticize the idea of just immersion, which is why with the pandemic, it's actually been really great for language learning because so much has gone online, such great materials have gone online where people can really reach a pretty high level on their own, immersing themselves with online materials.
Yes.
Much more than they could have 5-10 years ago.
Tis true.
So it's kind of a blessing, really.
Yeah, if you look at it that way. Well, we're going to really take our listeners here for a ride and just have you tell the story. We'll do it together, actually. I'll be playing the waiter at so you were at a eating with a group of Spanish-speaking friends. Take us back to that day that after being at a Latin dance school in Barcelona, you went out at a local bar. Is that right?
That's right. So I came to Barcelona already loving salsa dancing. So I immediately found a local Latin dance school, and on Saturdays I would go to their evening classes to take salsa classes. And the group there of teachers and students invited me next door to a tapas bar to have a very late dinner, which is very common to eat dinner at 10 o'clock at night. And everyone was chatting there. And of course, me not being embarrassed or afraid to just try things, even though I'd only been in Spain for about 3 months, just trying the Spanish. I tried to talk to the group and tell them things about myself, and it didn't go very well. It didn't really go as I had planned. So I'll leave it there. I don't know if I want to spoil the ending, but we were in I put myself in a very embarrassing situation by something I said at that dinner.
Well, let's take it. Let's take the listeners there with this wonderful but yet embarrassing story.
Okay, here we go. So again, I was eating dinner with a group of Spanish-speaking friends, and we're at a typical local bar.
¿Qué desea ordenar?
Tapas, tortillas de patata y pan con tomate.
Ok. ¿Qué desea beber?
Una cerveza estrella, por favor.
Ok. Ya mismo.
I was excited to have been invited to dinner as the only English speaker, but I had only been in Barcelona a few months and my Spanish was still very rudimentary. I was trying to tell the group at the end of how my Spanish classes were going, but I started fumbling over the words. The group listened on as I tried to formulate a few simple sentences until finally I sort of gave up. I put my hands over my face and said, "Estoy muy embarazada," thinking I was saying, "I'm really embarrassed." To add insult to injury, the girl next to me explained that embarazada means pregnant in Spanish. So I had basically just told everyone that I was really pregnant.
So what is the word for embarrassed then? I guess after you explained what you thought was the word, did she tell you, okay, when you say you're embarrassed, do you say this word? Did she do that afterwards?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to say embarrassed in Spanish, but the closest translation would probably be avergonzado.
Okay.
Avergonzado or avergonzada. Comes from the word vergüenza, which means like shame and embarrassment. So okay. I should have said, I estoy avergonzada would be more of a direct translation. Or I should have said, like, me da vergüenza. It gives me shame, which is another way to say it in Spanish. Very different than English.
Very different. Well, but having that experience, though, it just probably, I guess you have to kind of go through that in order to become an expert in what you're doing. To be a teacher, because then you're like, okay, you have to learn to be okay with making mistakes. Because I think in learning anything in life, I think that's the biggest mistake we as humans make, is we think, I have to get it right the first time. And that's obviously not true with anything. And it's good that you were willing to understand that going in, that you realize you were going to make mistakes, because you're, like you said, surrounded by people that only speak Spanish. So you're having to learn to, rather than being around people that are speaking English and being in that bubble, you're having to learn to, okay, well, I have to learn to be okay making mistakes.
Exactly. This is often difficult for adult learners to start speaking in any second language because of their fear of making mistakes. And they want to wait until their level is perfect before they start speaking. But unfortunately, that's not the way it works. If you think about how children learn languages, they spend 2, 3, 4 years babbling around and making sounds and making funny mistakes. And
right.
But they don't have vergüenza. They don't have embarrassment. They don't have shame for making those mistakes as kids. And so as adults, in some ways, we have to cut ourselves some slack, not take ourselves so seriously in terms of speaking our second language or third language, because it's going to be rough at first.
It sure is.
So my biggest advice for any adult language learner is to learn a good foundation of a few key structures in Spanish. Not really phrases. I mean, you don't want to sound like a parrot. You want to know how you're formulating the sentence, and so you can manipulate structures, which is why I think some base grammar is important in any language. But my advice is to get a good foundation of structures and vocabulary and start playing with those structures early on in spoken form. That doesn't mean you need to speak one-on-one with someone. You can actually practice speaking on your own. You can practice talking to yourself. You can speak into a recording device on your phone and hear yourself back. There's a lot of ways to practice without having to embarrass yourself in front of others in the beginning.
In the beginning, yeah. And like, you don't have to go into a group of people, like you said. Because honestly, that's what I thought you were going to say. Since that's how it started with you, but you're like, well, you can wait for that. You can like record yourself and just listen before you're ready. Okay, to even go one-on-one, because even at least with one-on-one, if it's someone that you trust, they're going to be like, oh wait, no, you don't say it like that. They're not going to say it in a way where they feel like they're making fun of you. Because I remember on a show, I don't know if you've ever seen it, was called Sábado Gigante. It was on Univision, and the host, Don Francisco, used to have this American doctor come on, and he would, the doctor spoke pretty fluent Spanish, but he would mispronounce things or say words that weren't correct, and he would kind of make fun of them. But I think the doctor knew that going into it, that was part of the show, and that was part of his shtick as a host. So a lot of the Latinos that watched that, they thought that was funny.
I bet.
They're like, oh, listen to this guy speaking Spanish. But I thought, well, I know it was for a show, but I think what makes it hard, I guess, at least for me, is, and you've probably experienced this too, is native speakers, sometimes when they speak, it's very fast sometimes. So that might make it intimidating for people to want to learn. Do you think that that's often, especially with students that you start working with, do they often bring that to your attention, that they say, yeah, I feel intimidated because everybody's talking fast and I can't make out the words?
Yeah, Spanish is one of the fastest spoken languages in the world. So my advice is to stick to one accent and
Okay.
hone in on that accent. So if you are going to be traveling mostly through Mexico,
Yes.
maybe practice listening to only Mexican Spanish podcasts.
Okay.
And listening is a passive skill, so is reading. So passive skills actually develop a lot faster than active skills, which is speaking and writing. Those are active skills. So your listening comprehension is something you can practice and improve on your own with podcasts, and there are a lot of resources out there to improve your listening. But I absolutely have students who have been studying Spanish for a long time, and they go out and hear it in the real world, and it sounds nothing like they're learning in their books. I can say the same thing about English students who I've met who are learning English in their books, and then they go into any American city and hear how we speak English. So, it's one of those things that you can warm yourself up to through podcasts. I think there are a lot of great high quality Spanish podcasts out there to expose yourself to that, but nothing's really going to beat being in the country for an extended period of time with the goal of improving your Spanish, right?
Yes.
So
Especially with food, because that's in going to, because that's a big part of the culture is the food. So learning how people, when they're ordering a specific dish, something that's very, very popular in that city that you're in, whether it's Barcelona, whether it's Mexico City, or if you're in the Dominican Republic, somewhere like Punta Cana, to know, okay, what do the natives usually order? So then you learning it to say it the way they do. And they might have a certain slang that maybe other Spanish speakers be like, well, what's that? Because that's one thing I've heard is that they call it by different names, the same food in different cultures.
Exactly. No, that's
Yeah.
totally true. And the variations of vocabulary, I won't even call it dialects because they're really all speaking the same Spanish. It's really
Yes.
vocabulary variations are so extreme in Spanish speaking countries. There are at least 10 different ways to say straw, depending,
Straw.
like a drinking straw,
Yes.
depending on what country you're in.
Okay.
There are also words, I won't mention them now, but words that are very offensive in some countries and totally normal
Innocent.
part of
yeah.
vocabulary in others. So you're kind of treading dangerous ground there when you're traveling. You really have to double check some of the vocabulary that you're using because you might accidentally offend someone.
Right, unintentionally.
Unintentionally.
Yeah, because it could mean something that's completely innocent over in a different country.
Yeah. And I'll take that back. You won't offend someone, but you'll definitely get some laughs in your way because you're obviously, it's not your first language, so you get a pass. You're not the locals know you're not trying to be offensive, but you'll
Right.
definitely get giggles and laughs and it's embarrassing. And then you find out what you said and either you can laugh it off yourself or it could be traumatizing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's different for each individual, but it's just amazing though how that one experience, well, not one, but one experience led to another. You're traveling, being a nanny, and just now you have your own website. It's La Mariposa Spanish Lessons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So once I came back from Barcelona, I spent the next 6 or 7 years continuing to perfect my Spanish. I lived in Mexico City for a couple years and passed some fancy tests and got my level really high. And when I got back to Sacramento again, I started tutoring on the side and I found out that I was pretty good at teaching Spanish. I had learned the language from the ground up and I was good at explaining it from the perspective of someone who learned it as an adult to another English speaker. And a few friends convinced me to transform it into a business, which became La Mariposa Spanish Lessons in 2019. And La Mariposa actually goes back to when I was in Barcelona. That was a nickname my friends gave me once I started traveling. The transformation of the butterfly was a symbolic nickname, and they called me La Mariposa. At one point, I had a blog called La Mariposa Vagabunda, the vagabond butterfly, and I'd write about my travels. So the nickname has followed me, and it has a lot of meaning for me, but it's also that symbolicness of transformation that happens when you become fluent in another language. It's transformative. So in 2019, I started La Mariposa Spanish lessons, basing that out of Sacramento, teaching mostly one-to-one lessons in person. The pandemic hit and I moved the entire business online, which ended up really opening many opportunities for me to grow and offer more services to more people, offer my programs and courses. And since then, I'm now teaching group programs and group courses to beginners all the way up to advanced. My courses are normally 6 weeks to 6 to 8 weeks long. They are online. I try to keep the group small and create community, and I absolutely love what I do.
That's
it's
important.
Incredible.
That is incredible. Yeah, because I also think that in being at the stage that you're at, before you got to that point, and when you were given that nickname, that had to just make you feel so good, right? Just that affirmation, especially from other Spanish-speaking friends, to have that nickname, La Mariposa, that had to just make you feel something beyond joy. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I had a lot of people following me back home, following my travels, reading my blogs, younger people, older people, people who told me that I inspired them. And I just felt like what I was doing had such great meaning, not for myself, but for others, and that it was important for me to share my story through those years. And even with the business, I continue to share the story over and over again and how transformational it was. And if learning a second language, if learning Spanish were easy, everyone would do it. I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but it is an incredibly rewarding thing to do. And it just intertwines and becomes a part of your life. And as all of us living here in the States, there's Spanish all around you. There are Spanish communities all around you. We're very lucky to have access to the language in all corners of the country.
Exactly. I'm in Pennsylvania, and there's communities over here in this part of the state. So yeah, like you said, everywhere you go, there's always Spanish-speaking communities. So there's always opportunities to learn.
Yeah, and even if you don't want to travel, I mean, you can be that person that steps up and translates for someone at the grocery store, at the bank. Can be a good Samaritan in your own community because you chose to learn another language. I think people think, well, I don't really have time or maybe the funds to travel the world with my Spanish, but there's so much impact you can make in your own backyard by learning Spanish in the States. So it's very important, in my opinion.
Important. So what kind of programs are you offering that we should tell the listeners about through your website that you offer through La Mariposa Spanish lessons? Yeah,
so right now I'm working on a 3-part series. It's a basic series called Alas. Alas means wings in Spanish, so it goes with the Mariposa theme. Yeah. So you're growing your wings to fly. And I've already completed one of the courses, Alas Uno, which is a kind of a 6-module course that I offer online all year long. It's a self-paced Spanish course with my support within a Facebook group. But a couple times out of the year, I do offer a live version of the course where I take a live group through all 6 modules. So that's my Alas Uno course, Alas 1. I'm currently finishing up the content for A las Dos. A las Dos. And that will be launching in a live format with me for 6 weeks. That'll be launching in early January. So if you're interested in kind of jump starting with the Spanish basics, it's very easy to jump into the A las Dos. A las Uno is more of a review for people who maybe took it in high school and college, which the majority of the people who start with me have seen a little bit of Spanish in their life. So you can totally jump into A las Dos. So if Spanish is on your list for 2023, I'm offering that. And then for more intermediate advanced learners, I have a book immersion program called Elevate, which means elevate yourself. It means soar. Sorry, it means soar. Okay. Yes, Elevate. And and it's where we take a book in Spanish, a chapter book in Spanish, and we read it over about 7 weeks. And I give students writing assignments and personal connection questions. We go over vocabulary and grammar. It's a much more deep dive into learning, not just a book club, which is why I call it a book immersion program. So I offer that book immersion program probably 4 times a year with a different book.
Okay.
And then of course one-to-one lessons with me as well. I tend to work with high basic and low intermediate students all the way up to advanced, where we really focus on specific topics in Spanish that they're struggling with one-to-one.
Wow. And where can people find you? I'll of course include all this in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. My website is www.lamariposaspanishlessons.com. If you want to get a taste of more of what I do have 2 free downloads, 2 free resources, one for beginners and one for intermediate. They're called my Spanish priority plans. They basically talk about how I learned at each level. So when I was a beginner and a basic student, what I did at that level to get to the intermediate level. And then once I was at intermediate, how I got over that intermediate plateau and made it to the advanced level, or the specific things I did. So those are both free on my homepage.
Wow. So you hear that, folks? Those 2 things are free, but I'm sure they're going to want to sign up once they immerse themselves in this beautiful language, because it is a very beautiful language. And just like you said, you don't have to travel for it if that's not an option for some people. But your experience, though, is helping so many people. It's amazing seeing what you're doing online. It's just incredible to see your experience, how it's helping other people, because that's what it is. It's more of an experience rather than just learning a language. Okay, we're learning this word, we're learning that word. Okay, let's immerse ourselves in it. Let's just really dig into it, because it's fun. Because look at how it started out with you learning salsa, getting into salsa and loving the music, and you're thinking, well, I want to know what these words mean. So it just kind of was one of those, I don't want to say happy accidents, but kind of like you just decided to dig in because you were like, this is actually so fascinating. Let me learn a little bit about this, and then look where it's led you today. It's amazing.
That's right. It has been an amazing journey, and I plan to do this for the rest of my life. This is what I was born to do.
Muy bien.
Muy bien.
Well, my guest today has been La Mariposa, Dominque Cordero. It's been wonderful having you on the show, and in the show description below, ladies and gentlemen, you can click on how you can get connected with her to start learning Spanish and mastering this beautiful language.
Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
We conclude this episode with an original song that was actually recorded for this podcast from the episode The Language of Love. Here's Mattias Signoroldi with Ariana Corona the language of love.
You and I come from different backgrounds. You and I get down to different sounds. You and I watch different kinds of shows. You and I put different spreads on your toast. We both don't always speak the same language, but we both speak the language of love. We both don't always speak the same language, but we both speak the language of love. You and I enjoy the same kinds of smells. That doesn't mean your perfume smells like hell. It's just that we use different sounding words, but it sounds like the clashing of two swords. When I said, when I'm with you, time stands still, I didn't mean you have a face that could stop a clock. We both don't always speak the same language, but we both speak the language of love. We both don't always speak the same language, but we both speak the language of love, the language of love.
Oh, look, Sheila, Roberto's giving Aurora a basil.
I know.
I think those songs were dedicated to us.
Thank you.
La música era preciosa.
Sí, ¿se terminó la música?